Tapa tū ki te rangi whakaia kauana hirunga tuko tipu, hei raro te ko te hono, ki kona koutou mihi mai ai, ka mau te hono e. Hono mai, e ngaiwi, ki tā tātou tautohe hakamutunga nei, ko te kaupapa here, ko te kaupapa Maori te iho, ko ngā pūkōrero o ngā rōpū tōranga pū ngā tumu, ko te hui tēnei, pōtitanga 2023, haumi e, hui e, taiki e. Ngā mate pūrara I te motu whānui haramai haere. Tātou kei te aweawe o te whenua ti hewa Māori ora, and welcome to this, the Hui Māori Policy Debate, featuring spokespeople from the leading political parties who are here to try and procure your vote. So, let's introduce them now. She is the spokesperson for the ACT Party here tonight. Karen Shaw, tēnā koe, nau mai rā. He is the spokesperson for Te Pāti Māori, Tāku Te Whereas, nau mai ahoa, tēnā koe. She is the spokesperson for the Green Party e Te Minita, Marama Davidson, hara mai rā.
Tēnā koe.
He is the spokesperson for the Labour Party e Te Minita anō, Willie Jackson, tēnā koe. He is the spokesperson for the National Party e Te Hoa Tama Pōtaka, nau mai rā. And he is the spokesperson here tonight for the New Zealand First Party, e Karae Shane, tēnā koe. E aku rangatira, tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai rā. We really appreciate your time. Let's start on the cost of living now. Willie Jackson, your party has a policy on GST off fruit and veg. It has a policy on dental health for those under 30, and it also has a working for families in-work tax credit that doesn't go to 160 to 200,000 children living in worst-off families. So why should Māori vote for the Labour Party?
You know, because we've got a universal policy that you've mentioned, and we've got a lot of other things too, but because we have a targeted policy that you've never seen before, a targeted policy in terms of Māori that has delivered $1 billion of targeted funding to Māori providers for the last 3 years, every year for the last 3 years. It's been brilliant. On top of that, we've got a Matatini Day. A Matatini investment, 32 million. And then we've got a Matariki Day. We've got a Maori Health Authority. This all helps.
But on cost of living.
This all helps in terms of the cost of living, because we have to get to our families and we have to get to Māori providers who provide by Māori for Māori.
But you've got
solutions.
parties on the left that have universal dental health care, universal GST of all kinds.
Right.
So what do you say to people who say you're not doing enough for Māori because those policies won't go far?
We're doing more than enough, because as a Māori caucus we have to run two strategies, a universal strategy and a targeted strategy that has been, well, we've actually been the most successful Māori caucus, Julian, in the history of Parliament and government. It's been brilliant. John Tamahere has given us a huge amount of credit. Tama Pōtaka was a big supporter before he became an MP. The kudos we're getting from Māori health providers, Māori leaders all around the country.
Talk about Māori health.
Julian, it's just been brilliant, and so the cost of living
we will get to Māori health after this. Marama Davidson, you're going to bring in a wealth tax. You're also introducing 1.5% tax on trusts. What do you say to those that actually your tax policy, even though it may help, is actually targeting those that are well off?
What I want to say is to our whānau at home, who I know are struggling, who are doing the best with what little they have, there is no reason why anyone in Aotearoa, especially our whānau Māori, should be struggling at all. Julian, it's just not acceptable that we have 311 of the wealthiest families in this country holding more than half of the country's wealth. That system is a rot. It has been ripping off workers and not people who have wealth, and the Greens plan is to change that, Julian, and I'm really proud that we will ensure that no matter what, every whānau can afford healthy kai and a home and their power bills, because it will be paid for by a wealth tax.
But you're funding it by a wealth tax.
Yep.
You're funding it by also putting 1.5% tax on trusts. Those are envy taxes.
No, not at all. And Aotearoa could be the envy of the world when we make the political decision to end whānau and children poverty. There is no reason. It is just political choice. And can I just be really clear here, Julian? Our income guarantee recognises that the wealth, that is held by the few was built on the backs of us, including Māori whānau and Māori whenua, and that needs to be shared back to the rest of the country.
Taku Te Whare, it's the same question to you, because you believe in the same policies. You pretty much have the same policies. GST off all kai, wealth tax also to be able to fund all of the policies that you propose, and also dental policy the same as the Greens. Again, it's the same question. You're funding that out of an EV tax to those who are well off.
Well, the thing is, Julian, what we are 100% clear of is that no single party is going to dramatically reduce the cost of living over the next 12 to 18 months, 2 years. So what we need to do is ensure that we pull the levers that we can. And those are, number one, getting more money back into the pockets of our whānau. And the Māori Party tax policy does that straight away, $125 for every whānau that earns below $60,000, which is the majority of our people. And number two is we have to tackle every point of the cost of living that's on a whānau that we can. So GST off kai, you're talking about $15 every $100, Julian. So for an average whānau spending $200 a week on kai, that's another $60.
But how are you going to do that when your leader has already said and reinforced again tonight that actually he doesn't necessarily want to be a part of a government, even if Labour and the Greens and you get through as a coalition, that actually he may still stay in opposition, as he has done since 1840s?
Yeah, Paiana. Well, that's, you know, the 3 years that Aori and Deb have had in Parliament have demonstrated what can be done from opposition. So whether or not the Māori Party makes it in, because it might very well be a yellow and blue government come October, but wherever the Māori Party is positioned, we will champion hard and we'll make sure that we're looked after.
OK, the ACT Party, Karen, talks about various tax cuts and removing regulations, for example, to make it easier for another foreign supermarket chain to set up in Aotearoa. Given the power of duopolies, why would that be one of the things that would attract the Māori voter to the ACT Party?
Yeah, you know, we have to have competition here, but we have to actually make this country appealing for people to come and invest in our country. And the red tape that exists at the moment just makes it near impossible to start a new business here and to bring a new supermarket here. We need to allow investment to come in here and to grow our economy so that there are more jobs for our people and better paying jobs for our people so that they can go ahead and have a better life and be able to feed their families.
So how do you help those Māori, 244,000, about a third of Māori who earn less than $30,000 a year, quickly, given the cost of living crisis?
Yeah, and I mean, we look at the state that our economy's in at the moment, and I don't think anybody can tell you it's going to be a real quick fix. I think it's around housing costs is the most highest price that people are paying at the moment. That's taking the most money out of the pocket. And it's about making sure that we make building a lot easier than what it is right now. We've got policies around lowering the houses of building and lower the rent, and people will have more money.
Let's move. Tama Pōtaka, your party has talked about tax a lot and tax cuts. Yet your finance spokesperson, Nicola Willis, admitted today that only 3,000 people would actually achieve $250 per fortnight. So how many of those 3,000 whānau are going to be Māori?
Look, tuatai me mihi kia Jason Wynyard, ka tika, ka ui ka tai ki e. Just in relation to the rising cost of living, this is something that really deeply affects all Kiwis, but particularly troubling for Māori and iwi communities. And we have a tax policy that's been announced, and it does influence a number of families. There are a number of families that it doesn't really touch on enough. But what we've seen is an economy linked into the linked into the cost of living crisis that has absolutely failed under peak kāwanatanga. So when you introduce too many regulations, when you start spraying taxpayer funds across all sorts of projects and ideas like Father Christmas, it gets really, really difficult to see a Boxing Day dinner.
You just admitted that your tax policies don't touch people enough, and we're talking about whānau Māori.
It doesn't touch everybody. That's what I said. It doesn't touch everyone.
It doesn't touch people enough. So we're talking about Māori whānau. So give me an answer to the question then. Of the 3,000 whānau that will get the $250 a fortnight, how many of them are going to be Māori?
Oh, I don't know the specific numbers of that. I haven't done that calculation. I don't think we have in the party. But what we are saying is that the cost of living sits alongside a number of economic issues, and we haven't got the economic settings right.
OK. Shane Jones, what is the New Zealand First policy? Because I note that you also have supported GST on fruit and veg, even though your leader tried to deny it. It's 15 on your policy. So what is the most significant policy that New Zealand First has to be able to help Māori, whānau Māori, in a cost of living crisis?
So let's deal first with the GST. Once we received the information as to the parlous state of the nation's finances, we took the view that in the event that we're in government after October the 14th, we need to do a deep dive as to how robust is the actual state of our nation's finances, and secondly, what money is generating value and what money can be redirected to other purposes. There's three things driving the cost of living crisis. Number one, inflation. The tax cuts of National will worsen inflation. Number two, the cost of food. The supermarkets need to be broken up as telecom was broken up. Number three, the cost of energy, and that can only happen when we break up and bring more competition into the energy sector, because at the moment, the owners of generators are disappearing like robber barons and consumers are being rogered.
Tēnā koutou ia koutou whakautu. Pai tēnei timatanga, a rāno atu ngā kaupapa hei wānanga mātātou. We will be back with more kia I tatunu mai e te iwi. After the break, we are talking health and workforce development on the Hui Maori Policy Debate 2023. We have the leading parties in this year's election talking Māori policy with us in the studio live. We're now going to talk about health. Taku Tawhiris, what significant policy will the Māori Party introduce quickly that will influence a change in Māori health outcomes after October 14th?
Free primary health care, Julian. Free primary health care. We know that our whānau don't go to the doctor or the hospital because it's cost prohibitive. Our kaumātua don't go and see to themselves because they feel they don't have the money. So what we do know is that there's money in the system for Māori. We'd flip that on its head, introduce a Māori health card. The money attached to your NHI number will be immediately attached to your card. The card's in your hand. If you get sick, or your tamariki gets sick, or your kaumātua gets sick, the cost is no longer an issue and we get more of our people being looked after more consistently.
Your party supports a Māori Health Authority, right?
100%, 25%, Julian, 25% of the health budget to Te Aka Whaiora is $2.5 billion a year.
Is that the best expression of rangatiratanga to be able to achieve equity in health outcomes?
Oh, it needs more than that, but this is where we started, huh? Okay. If we can't get ourselves up off 2 and 3% and speaking more too, in a democratic society, and if democracy is what we're preaching, then 20% is an easy number because that's what we are in the country.
Karen Shaw, why does your party not support the Māori Health Authority again?
Yeah, we just don't believe in funding based on race. We believe in funding based on need.
Well, it's not, this is based on need.
Target needs, Māori who are in need will be covered because we're making sure that people are getting the care they need and everybody's getting the care they need. What we would do is we make sure that we are actually funding GPs. We'd increase the capitation rate by 13% to make sure people can actually get into the GP. I got a letter the other day saying the fees were going up because of all the extra costs and they haven't had an increase. These are the areas that we need to target.
Okay, but
frontline services.
Specifically back on the Māori Health Authority, Te Aka Whaiora, you said that it's based on need, not race. But if the need is race, then surely your argument doesn't stand.
Yeah, and I'm not saying to get rid of Māori-based health.
No, but you're saying get rid of Te Aka Whaiora.
And there has been Māori-based health even before the Māori Health Authority was established. What I'm saying is there should be one entity and the funding is done from one entity rather than doubling up the bureaucracy when money could be going towards those who are in need.
Shane Jones, I tried to find something on the New Zealand First website on Te Aka Whaiora and I couldn't find anything, and I'm a bit confused. Do you support Te Aka Whaiora or not?
Te Aka Whaiora will not survive in any government New Zealand First is a part of.
Why not?
We prefer the focus on frontline investment developing more capacity, ensuring that more nurses can undertake more clinical functions that are currently monopolised by doctors, a substantial increase in the Farm Act budget. We will not agree with this cultural filigree, which is otherwise known as the Maori Health Authority.
If it's a cultural filigree that actually is supported by those who deliver outcomes on the ground, surely it's the best way to deliver those outcomes if they support it.
So the size of the health budget will be next year $30 billion. The outcomes will not be driven by changing structure. The outcomes will be driven by increasing the personnel and enabling the people at the front line to enjoy both the resources and the skills, not more central-based Māori bureaucrats.
And I guess the same question goes to you, Tama Pōtaka. Won't we spend more money disestablishing what is already in place, therefore generating less health outcomes, if we follow the National Party's policy on te aka whaiora and its disestablishment?
Well, we're absolutely cognisant of the acute Māori health needs and what is an acute health crisis throughout the country. Wait times, surgery, wait times, all sorts of challenges like ambulance ramping and ambulance diversions that are confronting our health system. So we're very aware that there are serious health crises for all communities, but particularly for Māori communities.
But you're going to disestablish the Maori Health Authority, which is supported by a lot of those people that actually generate the outcomes you're saying you want.
Well, we have a different view around the best way to get the commissioning of health services closer to the hapu and home, rather than establishing a new bureaucracy that doesn't get those resources out.
So you're going to disestablish the new bureaucracy by going back to the old bureaucracy?
No, there are some iwi Māori partnership boards, for example, that have no authority, they have no ability to commission services close to the hapu and home, and they have no funding. We would prefer that perhaps those boards are better funded and given authority to do things rather than relying on Molesworth Street to tell us what the best health needs of Māori are, because they are actually close to the action. What happens in Te Tai Tokerau may have a different health need compared to those in Te Tai Rāwhiti.
Willie Jackson, doesn't the National Party have a point? The one-year report, the report that came out on te aka whaiora, was not good. It hasn't delivered.
They have no point. In fact, they're such a disappointment to te ao Māori, these two over here. You know, we thought they'd do a lot better. The reality is they go against what every Māori health professional is saying. They wouldn't be able to find 3 doctors who agree with them in te ao Māori. It's disgraceful how these two are waffling on, because this is the want of our people. Our people have told us for years they want a Māori health authority. They want the opportunity, Julian. But these two know more. They're like David Seymour.
Okay, so
I'll call an ambulance.
but I think one of the things that they have talked about, hang on, I think one of the things they have talked about, Willie, is we do need extra nurses. That's right. We do need more doctors. That's right. We do need more people participating. The National Party's got a policy of setting up a new health school. Isn't that the way to go?
No, the way to go is to invest more in the health system. And we as a government have put 3 times the amount of money into the health system than the previous government. The previous government left this health system in a total mess. We had sewage coming down the walls of the different hospitals. Our people could not access health. The Māori Health Authority is the want of te ao Māori. And sadly, we have 2 respected people, well, they used to be respected, these two over here, who have gone against the will of their people. Their tipuna would be...
Air New Zealand tickets to the surface paradise. Air New Zealand tickets to surface paradise. One way for nurses and doctors.
Just a joke to them is shocking.
Can Jules have a go? OK. Marama Davidson, the Y2575 report makes it pretty clear, actually, about what Māori sought out of that report to the tribunal, out of the claim to the tribunal. The Māori Health Authority wasn't actually exactly what Māoridom wanted. They wanted rangatiratanga to be able to meet the principles under Te Tiriti o Waitangi.
The fact that any politician can stand here and deny the structural racism that has been part of why the outcomes have been racist is quite a disappointment. The fact that Shane and Tama are saying we do not need structural change is ignoring the very structural drivers that have also contributed to racism across our health system for nearly 180 years. To expect 9 months of the Māori Health Authority to resolve the issues of 180 years of colonialism is really piss poor, actually.
You've been doing it for 3 years. You've been prepping for 3 years.
Julian, the testosterone have had their go, so I'm just going to keep going. I'm just going to keep going because we will both continue to fund and further expand the mahi of te aka whaiora.
So that's a and more
by Māori, for Māori, kaupapa Māori house.
That's the point I was going to ask.
Which works together.
So how are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that if you are, as a part of the government, how are you going to do that?
Yep, so the Prevention Violence Mahi that I have been a minister of for the past 2.5 years is a prime example where we have been able to starting to make both structural change and getting pūtea directly to our kaupapa Māori organisations on the ground.
Tēnā koutou i au koutou kōrero. Ngā mihi nui i au koutou whakauru i haka puakina e koutou. I don't know if I'm a part of the testosterone comment, but anyway, we'll see how we go. We are going to take a short break now. When we come back, we discuss race and te tiriti o Waitangi. This is the Hui Māori Policy Debate. Te pōtitanga. E mātakitaki ana koutou i tā tātou hui e wete ana I ngā kaupapa here Māori a tēnā o ngā rōpū. We have these spokespeople for the leading parties in this year's election with us live in studio. We are talking race and te tiriti o Waitangi. Karen Shaw, the Ag Party wants a referendum on the Treaty of Waitangi on te tiriti. Why should the majority get to vote on the right of the minority?
I just think we need to have these conversations because the division around New Zealand is really high right now. No matter where you go, people are really worried about how this is going to affect them in their lives, and they want to have an understanding of what's actually happening. And we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that we can move forward together as a country, hand in hand, side by side, taking the best from every culture in this country and creating a country that we can all be proud of. Right now, people feel like that conversation has only been had with a few, and they don't actually understand what's happening right now.
Well, to be fair, New Zealand's had almost 200 years to learn that story. Right?
Yeah.
So the other thing I want to raise is, and you talk about the conversation on race. Your leader has been leading on the conversation on race. He can't stop talking about race, and then he says it's Maori that keep talking about race. So do you agree that your leader, in particular, has been a part of making race an issue in this country?
I think race has been an issue for the last 6 years because this government has implemented things that people do not understand and they're actually worried about it. So we're actually only having the conversations that people out in the community are asking us to have. We're there to represent all New Zealanders, and they are entitled to have that conversation. They're entitled to ask questions. Asking questions is not racist.
OK, Shane Jones, your party has said that it wants to review or actually expunge principles of te tiriti o Waitangi. How do you do that when rangatiratanga is a part of te tiriti o Waitangi?
The party regards the treaty as a foundation document, but I tell you what I recoil from. This treaty debate represents the treaty actually being unhinged from its historic moorings. It's now been laden with the doctrine of Indigenous rights, which I have no time for, and it was brought into New Zealand by John Key. More importantly, we've moved away from the bicultural frame, which has historically been the way in which the treaty was conceived. We now have politicians, to this side of me, consistently focusing only on the Maori version. The treaty created an indivisible new reality. Those are the words of Maturata. The treaty created a new reality. It blended our tangata whenua interests and the Crown. You can't rewrite the treaty either through a referendum or laded it with all the guilt-tripping ideology of victimhood we're hearing from the other side.
I'm sorry, I think the reason you said those on the left, you're all Maori. There's a Maori version of the Treaty of Waitangi. Yeah. I don't understand the argument that you make where you're saying...
Waitangi, but if you look at the Waitangi Tribunal, it has used both texts. Both texts has been the bicultural foundation of how we've understood the treaty. And it's a very sad development because Jacinda never campaigned on the things that she introduced, including co-governance and other treaty interpretations. It's triggered this very, very nasty behaviour that we're seeing throughout the country.
Pōtaka, you could be in a coalition government with both ACT and New Zealand First who talk about the treaty in this way. Are you comfortable with the way in which the treaty is articulated by these parties?
I think it's very unhelpful to be talking about referendums at this stage on the treaty. We're really focused on sorting out the economy, addressing the historical treaty settlement processes and ensuring that the key drivers of inequality, such as housing, such as education, such as health, are addressed appropriately. All those matters are really the focus of where our conversation is during this election and going forward in the event that we earn the trust of New Zealanders.
Do you accept that race has become a part of this election campaign, driven by particularly those who could be a part of a coalition government with you and your party?
What we are really focused on is sorting out the economy.
No, but answer the question, though. Do you agree that those parties who could be in a coalition government with you have driven a race agenda in this election campaign?
Well, I don't really listen too much what other parties are talking about. I'm really focused on what National stands for. And what we stand for is sorting out the economy, which is absolutely broken as a result of 6 years of peak kāwanatanga.
Willie Jackson, do you accept that there's a responsibility from your government to be able to help to educate the country on things like co-governance, which, by the way, you don't appear, or your party actually don't appear keen to be talking about in this election campaign?
So you're asking me, do we have a responsibility to explain that better?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, no, I'd agree with that.
OK. Why has that not happened?
Well, it has happened, but we were probably a bit slow off the mark, if I'm being honest. But I want to come back to your other question. There's no doubt that race has been playing a part in this election, but I don't think it's from the people. And every focus group we put up, housing, education, health, other priorities, no one really talks about what the ACT Party is waffling on about. But they want the people to be talking about division in the treaty. It's the ACT Party who wants this. We don't hear this in our focus groups, Julian. One of the best things I read in the last week, Jules, was from Audrey Young, who made it very clear, Seymour needs to read this, that Maori have their own unique set of rights. She said, this is a top political commentator, editor in this country, and she said, Doug Graham said it, and Jim Bolger said it, and they said, New Zealand, get used to it. Maori have rights, they have Indigenous rights, get used to it.
But we don't seem to be hearing you talking about things like he puapua. The other parties talk about he puapua more than you do. That's your report.
Well, no, I'm not talking about he puapua because it's gone.
No.
And we're still getting on with the mahi. We gave them $5 million to look after things a few months ago, and I'm proud of the work that they're doing, and that work will continue. But people need to read Audrey Young's article, particularly Karen and Seymour, and she'll explain to them very clearly that Maori have a unique set of rights, and they shouldn't be scared of them.
Marama Davidson, with regard to race in this election campaign, do all of us have to take, do all of you as candidates have to take responsibility for the fact that Māori have been a political football, continue to be a political football in this campaign?
Yes, of course we do. And matua Shane Tama, our tupuna never, ever ceded sovereignty. They made it really clear that was the moemoeā. Talk about the tupuna moorings. The moemoeā was always to uphold our mana motuhake and our tino rangatiratanga. And we've got ACT over here talking about only 6 years has race been an issue, completely undermining the ongoing hundreds of years and generations of takahi that has continued to be breached under Te Tiriti. If we want a truly blended understanding, the way that our tupuna foresaw, then we will actually see the Crown and organisations start to properly honour the mana motuhake and the sovereignty of Māori, and no, that hasn't happened yet.
How are you going to do that, though, if you're not a part of a government? If you're in opposition with Labour and the Māori Party, how do you do that? How do you continue that journey?
All of us as politicians...
But I'm asking you how you're going to...
And that's why I'm saying have a responsibility, no matter whether we are in government or on the crossbenches, to uphold the fact that our tupuna never ceded sovereignty. We worried about co-governance? Holy heck, that's got nothing on tino rangatiratanga.
Jules,
Co-governance is just working together. That's all that is.
And Jules, you've got. Can I just drop in there because Takuta made a very good point. So many of our activists raise this kōrero.
I'd rather you didn't. I need to move to Takuta first, but I want to give Takuta Whera some time here because, you know, very clearly Hana Rāwhiti Maipi Clark says that she has been targeted and the Maori Party says that she has been targeted as well. But other parties have said the same thing is going on here. Have you tried, and this is the question, have you tried to make that issue as a part of your political campaign?
We're just standing up for who we are, Jules. And here's the thing. Racism is a symptom of ignorance. And for far too long, around Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the country has been left ignorant, devoid of the facts. There have been nearly 45 years of court rulings upholding Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Right. Nobody knows about it. This is the problem. In Aotearoa, there's no prerequisite for a politician, an MP, to have any understanding of Te Tiriti o Waitangi or the history of this country.
Right.
So how do you do it?
These are the things that prop up this conversation, and when leaders stand up and start saying things that embolden other people to take actions, that's a dangerous situation for us to be in. I want to say this for everybody out home. Go and have a look at the He Tohu exhibition. It's where Te Whakaputanga o Te Rangatiratanga o New Tirini, the Declaration of Independence, alongside Te Tiriti o Waitangi and the Women's Suffrage Bill are held as the founding documents of this country. And there's a brilliant quote in it by Dame Shaun Elias, 20-year Chief Justice of this country. Yep. And she says it can't be disputed that the text of the treaty is the Maori text.
You can see me motioning to move on. But we have more after this break. Ki u e te wiki, u e te wi Maori. We are discussing climate change. A tai hoa ake nei. This is Te Pōtitanga 2023. It's the Hui Maori policy debate with spokespeople from the leading parties in this year's election campaign. We are talking Te Ahuarangi climate change. Shane Jones, you said New Zealand First will not be frog-marched to the altar of climate hysteria. Yet New Zealand First signed the Zero Carbon Act. Aren't you already a part of the battalion?
We indeed did agree to that legislation. We had no idea that the current chair of the Climate Change Commission would be such a showboater, and the sooner that he goes, the policy environment will improve. Our focus is on adaptation, learning to both invest and cope with the consequences of these adverse natural weather hazards, driven by El Nino, La Nina, and obviously a change in the climate. And I say one thing to my opponents: you can kill every cow tomorrow in New Zealand. You will not change the climate. Unless we have an economy that generates a surplus, we will not be able to afford the accoutrements that define us as a first world.
But the experts will tell you, you decrease pollution, you decrease emissions, that is the greatest impact you can have on climate change.
In one day, China generates 4.2 times more than we generate in a year.
Matua.
We cannot, no, we'll hear more of the grievance mentality from the Green Party very sure. They ruined the ETS, they've destroyed the market, and now they want Maori to pay $30 a hectare for their carbon forests.
Matua.
The Greens and Labour have not delivered any concrete results that's going to improve the climate. Wait, help is on its way.
I didn't realise in a Maori policy debate we'd be talking about China, but there we go. Tama Pōtaka, Nationals committed to meeting net zero by 2050, but has left agriculture out of the ETS. Why? And why would you do that?
You know, I've been involved in a lot of Māori agribusinesses over the years, and I just stand back and look at the situation and say, actually, the ETS, as it's currently pitched, is not going to work for a country of our nature, and we're not going to throw Māori agribusiness and other farmers to the ETS wolves in order to get a best-in-breed country certificate in 2051. We just won't do that. But we will work with industry. We will put research and other funding into the agribusiness space to ensure the emissions are dropping.
OK, but you are going to ditch the clean car discounts, and you're also going to rely on technology to meet the target of net zero by 2050, when most of that technology actually doesn't even exist yet.
Yeah, that's why we have to put some research money into it to make sure that exists. But it's not just the clean car discount, it's actually the ute tax that makes it harder for Māori workers to go to work because they've got to pay an extra $8,000 to drive their ute to work.
Willie Jackson, your party's recently announced that you are partnering with Fonterra to cut coal use at its dairy factories, an investment of $90 million. Why should we be paying polluters not to pollute?
Well,
corporate welfare.
It's all part of what we're doing in terms of a strategy. The most important part for me, Julian, in terms of what we're doing as a Māori crew, is we've put a Māori influence or framework in place in terms of this kaupapa. I want to thank Marama and James for that. It gave it this climate adaptation plan that Shane talks about. Has got Māori all over it, in terms of what we're doing in terms of infrastructure, what we're doing in terms of transport, what we're doing with our people at the coalface. Our emissions reduction plan has got a Māori strategy in place. It's important that we have something in place in terms of just transitions, in terms of te tai ao, in terms of biodiversity. Again, we've got Māori frameworks and a Māori strategy within that. Right across the spectrum, we've got Māori input. And I think that's something that our people need to be proud of, Julian.
Marama Davidson, you're being applauded by Willie Jackson, despite the fact that the cabinet that the Labour Party leads didn't listen to the advice of both James Shaw and your party. So how do you respond when he says that?
Need more Green MPs, need more ministers around the decision-making table so that we can make sure we reduce our emissions, not just adapt to worse and worse weather impacts and climate impacts, like the deniers over here want to insist that we keep doing te oranga o te tai ao, te oranga o tātou katoa. We also, Julian, cannot allow polluting industries to keep polluting. And the difference between us and these parties who want to be in government, between ACT, National and New Zealand First, is they want to allow pollution to continue to go into our climate. That is offensive against our mokopuna and future generations who deserve a stable planet. We need to support our whānau into jobs that are going to take us into the future, not jobs that are going to be hammered by climate change.
So how do you move the deniers who could be part of the government?
What I want to acknowledge is the many, many Māori communities and activists all around the motu who know that we have to move our people and te ao Māori into cleaner industries and who want that to happen.
Takata Ferris, you've talked about, and your party has talked about, making agriculture a part of the ETS and a part of the emissions program. How are you going to do that when you've got immovable objects that are a part and potentially going to be a part of a coalition of a government after the election?
Well, hey, ko tāku ki a tātou, ko te oranga o te tai ao, kei te kapo o tō tātou ringaringa e hoa. Kei te kapo o tō tātou ringaringa. My colleagues have spoken about the ETS and the grander things around climate change globally. What I'm going to talk about is local destruction of local environments. Our waterways, every river, every manga, every wetland, every estuary, every coast, every reef have slowly degraded over my lifetime, e hoa. And for all of my diving, fishing brothers and sisters out there who are tasked with the job of going out and filling up bins and bins of kinas, pawas, crayfish, kanai, kahawai, and anything else that you need to put kai on at your hui, at your tangi, at your 70th, those things are all disappearing at a rate that will not last. Will not last. So Te Pāti Māori stands for that. It stands for looking after us, our interests, our knowledge, our customs and our way of life.
Before I come to Karen, how are you going to move the immovable objects? How are you going to move the so-called, quote-unquote, deniers, as they've been labelled here tonight?
Well, the deniers will either end up moving themselves or the people will move.
I don't get that vibe.
Te Tai Rāwhiti and the Tautokero have been underwater all year and they're getting prepped up to be dried out for the rest of the year. Australia's on fire today, Jules. Australia's on fire today, and they're only in spring.
I want to move to Karen. I want to move to Karen. Karen, the ACT Party is promising to repeal the zero carbon. Can I have your attention? Thank you very much. The ACT Party is promising to repeal the Zero Carbon Act and remove the ban on oil and gas exploration, which are big take for te ao Māori. So what do you say to Māori who say, why would we even consider voting for the ACT Party?
We have to make sure that as we're adapting to the climate that's changing, that we're not making people's lives more expensive when it comes to food, when it comes to everyday cost of power and living, and we have to have something to replace something before we go and ban it. And at the moment, we didn't have anything to replace the gas that we're now using in our homes to heat our water, to cook our food. Restaurants use it, and we're actually getting a very low storage of that gas right now.
But you know the current issues we are facing, particularly with mahinga kai, he iwi mahinga kai, te iwi Māori. Why, again, would Māori consider voting for you when they're already seeing the impacts of climate change on their pātaka kai?
We have to make sure that we're not making it unaffordable for people to live while we're adapting to climate change. Our food's growing in cost, everything we're doing is growing in cost, and we have to make sure that our quality of life is not dropping at the expense of not adapting and getting ready for climate change.
Julian, there's no adapting to 2.5 degrees increase in the warming of the temperature. There's no adapting for that. We also have to bring down emissions.
I'm going to move. What we're hearing is mitigation as opposed to, well, actually not even mitigation, adaptation. We are moving into our last part after this break. We move to employment and the aspirations that each of these spokespeople have for their parties that will encourage Māoridom to vote for their parties at the elections. Stay with us. We have more after this. Wauraki mai rā koutou ki tā tātou hui, ko te kaupapa here Māori te iho. We have representative spokespeople from the leading parties here with us at this Hui Māori policy debate. And we move now to employment. Marama Davidson, what's the most significant policy the Green Party has that will move the dial, not only just on employment, but workforce development, skills and opportunities?
Julian, the biggest threat that we have to our jobs, especially for Māori, is climate change and the weather impacts and the changes to our environment that Takatu was just referring to. Those are the biggest threats. The fact that Matua Shane is trying to say that we are exaggerating the impacts. We're at 1.2 degrees now, and will our whānau on the coast and in Taitokero say that we are exaggerating the impacts at 1.2 degrees? Imagine. So
we're on employment.
moving our Green Party jobs for nature, which 3 of my hapu are already using to help protect our ngahere and our wai and conserve our whenua. Those are the sorts of jobs that the Green Party have pulled into place for our iwi, for our whānau around the country, and we want to do more of that.
Aren't you also proposing, though, an extra week of annual leave and increasing bereavement leave for tangi? So with those who have employees, under 50 employees in work, aren't you making it harder on those businesses?
For our whānau Māori, we are proud to have always protected workers' rights, to make sure that our workers are being paid what they deserve. deserve, to protect their conditions for work, to make sure they are safe at work. I am proud, Julian, of continuing to be staunch on the front line of rights for work.
Takuta Ferris, same question. The most significant policy that will have the greatest impact to move the dial on employment and workforce development?
20% procurement policy on all government contracts. Now, we all know that there is billions and billions, probably hundreds of billions of dollars worth of infrastructure work that has to happen in this country across probably generations going into the future. Māori need to have a solid say in the procurement of all of that money and all of that work. I'll give you a quick example. This is what procurement means. It means you've got a footprint in the industry end of the supply chain.
Don't we already have that?
No, we
the
don't.
Minister of Māori Development
No, we don't. It's not enough. It's not enough. No. Willie's going to tell us 2% is good, but it ain't. And neither is 8. Neither is 8. So here's my example. Here's my example. Ngai tahu have, he toki ki te rika, training the young people and people who need to get back into work. He toki ki te mahi, brokering those people into jobs, and Ngai Tahu Holdings has Ngai Tahu Developments and Ngai Tahu Construction. So when you have control over the industry end of that supply chain, Julian, our people thrive. That's what we need, 20% procurement.
Karen Shaw, ACTA's going to turf out fair pay agreements, reintroduce 90-day trials and put a moratorium on minimum wage increases for 3 years. How possibly can any Māori support a party that not only has those policies, but actually can't see a workforce development strategy from the ACT Party for Māori and employment?
Look, we support making businesses easier to run, easier to hire people, easier to actually grow their businesses so that we can grow jobs. Right now, businesses are really struggling. They've had it pretty tough over the last few years, and they need a little bit of a reprieve to take a breath and get back on track with being able to afford to run their business. And there's just too much red tape in their way to run their businesses right now. But what I do have to say is there are programs within the community that are absolutely fantastic, run by businesses. My family benefited from them, and that was apprenticeships, making sure that you could get the skills while you're being paid, and businesses do run those, and we need to make sure that we're supporting that to continue. And also being able to contract and having control over how you work and how you deal with your finances. Sometimes you don't want to be a PAYE.
Okay, I want to come to Shane Jones. Shane Jones, your leader has said there needs to be expectations of getting off the dole and back to work, and if they can't find a job, we will give them one as part of their social contract with the New Zealand taxpayer. What the heck is he talking about?
67,000 Māori are on the dole and other benefits, up from 48,000 in 2018 at a time where there's been a desperate need to find people to fill jobs. We must deal to the ethos that has grown in amongst our own people that free money is a better option than working. That's what Winston Peters means.
So that punitive approach, though, doesn't deal with the levers that actually end up developing the root issues that we have in terms of lack of skilled workforce development and also unemployment. You haven't got a housing policy. I struggle to find your employment policy, so why should Māori actually support New Zealand first when it comes to employment and skills development? And
no policy.
All they need to do is look at 2017, 2020, who's the party that bought connectivity to LA Marae, $100 million to do up the marae, $650 million dedicated to Tai Tokerau. The vast majority of it went in projects that are of direct benefit to Māori, including water storage, which is a practical response rather than the banshee approach we're hearing from the parties on the left.
Tama Pōtaka, you and the National Party has a similar policy about trying to get people back to work. But what policy actually deals with the issues? Education and those kinds of policies that will drive a much more thriving employment economy.
Yeah, I think we've been pretty clear on our teaching the basics brilliantly and other related education policies to get young people back into learning reading, writing, counting, really focused on actually encouraging kids to go back to school. Under the last couple of years, we've seen an absolute absence of young Māori from school. They're just not attending as they should be. So when it comes to education, we believe that we are the party of education. When it comes to the infrastructure builds, we've actually announced the infrastructure builds, some of which Labor wants to reinstate after they got rid of them 6 years ago. For example, the Cambridge to Piarere Highway. So we've announced roads of national significance that we will build that will generate jobs. In addition, we've also said when it comes to businesses or organisations like Kāinga Ora, we will make the funding for Kāinga Ora more contestable amongst iwi providers, community housing providers, and don't leave it just for gov.nz to do these jobs. Other people can do them, iwi and Māori can do them, and probably better.
Willie Jackson, given those unemployment figures and given the figures that we just talked about here, don't they have a point? Don't Tama and Shane Jones have a point?
No, Shane is a total contradiction. He actually worked with me in terms of getting young people off the dole. We worked hand in hand. So Winston says one thing, then Shane does another thing. The reality is the policy going forward has to be an investment in our young. We have to keep pushing apprenticeships, mana and mahi, pautama rangatahi. I think we've done a lot here. We've got so many young Māori in employment. I'm proud of what we've done in terms of training. And on the business side, our procurement has been a huge success. 8%. Can I just say this to my whanaunga takuto? And I didn't want to say anything negative about him, but now I have to, because he talked about 20%. The Māori Party, I have to remind him, never got 1% in terms of procurement in their 9 years in government. We got 8%, and we have got over $1 billion into the Māori business economy, and Māori business are so grateful. They're thanking us. We're on the right track. So
we're going to wrap. I did want to give more time, but unfortunately we are out of time. I've always been a believer. You always try and give the audience more and leave on a high note. So we are going to leave it here. I do want to thank you all, though, for being a part of our kōrero tonight and also putting up your hands to advocate for our people. The only final thing I will say is we wish you all the best of luck for the election next Saturday on October 14th. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa, e aku rangatira tēnā koutou katoa. Our thanks, of course, to Karen Shaw, to Takata Ferris, to Marama Davidson, Willie Jackson, Tama Potaga, and Shane Jones. And our last message to all of us here and watching and listening is me puta ki te pōti. Please get out and vote. It is your right and your decision to decide who of these parties will lead us for the next 3 years. Me pōti Māori mā a kia mau ki te tūranga o taputapu a te haumi e, hui e, tai ki e.
Nā te puna whakatongarewa te hui I tautoko.